Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. LaSella. I'm the president of the NAACP New Bedford Branch. I'm happy to welcome you to our program this evening entitled Perspective, Young Voices of the Movement. We're so happy to have all of you here. We're excited about our panelists, to have them here. We have panelists that have been working very, very hard the last couple of months and to make sure that we're addressing racial equity in our community. So we're happy to have all of you here. The way tonight's program will work is that the panelists will introduce themselves and they'll talk a little bit about the work that they've been doing for about 2 to 3 minutes. And then after that, we'll have some questions from the moderator, myself, and then we'll open it up to all of you to ask questions as well. And so if you have questions, just hold off on your questions and be prepared to ask questions at the end. We have an exciting panel. I'll also be letting some folks in as they're coming in as well. So again, we're excited to have all of you here, and thank you for joining our program. Tonight, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, the purpose of tonight's program is to really hear from young activists, who have been doing this work for quite some time. And we wanted to create a platform to let them talk about issues that are important to them, policies that are important to them, and just the experiences that they're having at this time. And so feel free to share the Zoom invite. Feel free to share the information as this program will go to about 7 o'clock. And so again, we're certainly happy to have all of you with us. Certainly want to recognize the Vice President of the branch, Renee Ledbetter. Thank you for being here. Grateful for your leadership as well. And all of our executive committee members, Andrea Gar-Barnes, appreciate you for being here as well. Our education chair, Dr. Charlemya E. So why don't we go ahead and get started with our panel. So I'll go ahead and start with Kamiya Parkin. Kamiya Parkin can go and introduce herself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there. Go ahead, Kamiya.
Thank you so much, LaSella, not only for putting together this panel, but for also inviting me into this conversation. I feel really, really honored to be here to just speak with other young activists about the work that they're doing and all different types of perspectives. But my name is Kamiya Parkin. I currently serve as the president of the UMass Boston NAACP College chapter. I also serve as the current first vice president for the NEACU College division. Those are positions that I'm very, very proud of because I like helping people and I like helping to represent youth, especially in places where people think that youth aren't active. And trying to get more youth active to be in the association. Some current work that I'm doing right now with my chapter is we're trying to work with our police, our campus police right now to create a community review board with students on it so that students can help oversee misconduct by police officers that happen with students of color. We're also holding positions with the dean of students so that we're also creating a code of conduct board to overlook the student code of conduct so that students of color are also in that process and making sure that our student code of conduct is not disproportionately affecting students of color in their disciplinary actions. And then something that we're also helping with students right now is that the City Council of Boston, about 2 weeks ago on Juneteenth, they delivered a letter to the mayor, talking about Black and Brown agenda. So the Black and Brown agenda of people of color in the city of Boston. So we've been really helping to push that narrative and to help students of color in Boston really say, these are what our counselors committed to helping people who look like us and to like help them get to city council hearings and meetings and understanding what's going on within the city council, especially when they just decided on their budget. So trying to educate people around those policies as well. So that's a little bit of the work that I've been doing right now. So.
Wonderful, Kamiya. Thank you so much. We'll go to the next person on the flyer, which is Amanda Kufo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Kufo. I am a recent graduate from UMass Dartmouth. Graduated with a bachelor's in political science and government and another bachelor's in philosophy. I've been working closely with LaSella Hall, the Unity House in UMass Dartmouth. We focused on racial justice issues, social justice issues on the campus and around New Bedford. I also was the previous student trustee on the UMass Board of Trustees, recently working on different policies regarding UMass. My main thing that I worked on was policies that directed towards student of color organizations and the policies that revolve around their funding and how they were receiving funds. There's a lot of issues around the inequities on how they were being funded and how they were receiving funds. And so a lot of my work revolved around changing the policies and changing the systems in place that would direct the money that they paid for towards their organizations and the events that they hosted on campus. Other than that, I just recently joined the NAACP Education Committee under Charlemya E, who's the chair. And that's pretty much what I've been doing so far. And thank you for coming here and listening to us as young people in the movement, trying to make changes and raising our voices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kufo. Now we'll have Charlemya E, please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for setting this up, LaSella. My name is Charlemya E. I'm a recent grad from UMass, have my bachelor's in biology and a master's in STEM education. I've been working closely with LaSella since, I guess, 2015, 2016 at the Unity House. And a lot of my work at UMass Dartmouth surrounded around making sure that students are getting educated on social justice issues and making sure that was a part of the curriculum and their daily learning, I guess, experiences. And I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome, wonderful. Now introduce Drea Moore for Collective for Change.
Hi, everyone. Again, thank you, LaSella, for putting this on. My name is Drea Moore. I'm the president for the Collective for Change here in New Bedford. I'm also a teacher at our sister school in New Bedford. And I'm also the youth counselor at NAACP, New Bedford Branch.
Wonderful. Drea, thanks for being here. Olivia, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I just want to thank everyone for their time and also thank LaSella for putting together this Zoom call. My name is Livia Fonseca, and I am Vice President of Administration of a new grassroots organization along with Drea. And our organization is really just committed to empowering the Black and Brown youth of New Bedford, and that's through a variety of different things. We hosted a Juneteenth event, we hosted a Unity Day event, and we're also just trying to start more educational programs, start educating people on their local elections, and also just providing the community with resources that they need in order to succeed.
Wonderful. And I'm not for sure, Christian Ramel, are you on the call? If not, we'll go ahead and go to Akia. Go ahead, Akia.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces and those that will get to learn as we go along with this conversation. My name is Akia S. Callum. I am the proud president of the Connecticut State Conference NAACP Youth and College Division. I also serve as chair of National Initiatives and Development for the NAACP National Youth Works Committee. Just a couple of things that we've been focusing on, and we'll get into that conversation moving on a little bit further in, but as you may know, the NAACP has 6 guiding game changers: civic engagement, criminal justice, education, health, economic sustainability, and environmental justice. And we focus, a lot of our work is intersectional, so we know that we don't work in silos. What we've been focusing on in Connecticut, however, is the hashtag We Are Done Dying campaign. We recognize that during the time period of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, and a lot of these others that died at the hands of police violence, and these weren't isolated incidents, and it also happens in Connecticut. Connecticut actually has, from 2001 till now, we had about 80 people on record that have died from excessive force by the hands of police. So figuring out what that looks like logistically, whether it's abolishing the police in its entirety, defunding the police, and knowing that these things are not synonymous and they don't overchange with each other. So making sure that people have education around that as well. Police accountability, what state's attorneys actually have power in doing. We just had a similar case, and Kamiya was a part of that conversation with our state's attorney in Hartford, and holding people accountable. So that's one area of work that we've been focusing on. We've also been talking about COVID-19. As a lot of you guys have already mentioned, coronavirus further inundates a lot of the communities of color that we think about. So PPE equipment and small business loans, minority-owned businesses, what does that look like for us and the communities that we service, and figuring out how we can get those resources to them in a fast and equitable way. And then lastly, of course, 2020 is a very critical year. Not only do we have the 2020 census, which if you have not filled that out yet, I encourage you to do so, but we also have our elections. Connecticut happens to have our primaries being pushed out from June to now August 11th. So making sure people are aware that they could fill out the absentee ballot, they could actually send it in with through postage. It has already been sent from our Secretary of State, Denise Merrill. It should be already in your mailbox or in your hand. And all you have to do is simply check off that, coronavirus is a real thing. You don't feel comfortable with going into the booth to actually do your in-person ballot, and have that sign off in that way. But I'll get into the logistics and the mechanical stuff further on this conversation. But thank you, LaSella, of course, for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. Although Connecticut is just a stone throw away, I always feel a part of family when I'm with Massachusetts.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Certainly, I want to recognize Mayor John Bullard. Appreciate you for being on the call. Thanks so much, Mayor Bullard. Appreciate you. Thank you. Definitely want to. I thought I just saw a representative, Jacob from Senator Montigny's office. Jacob, thank you for being on the call as well. So appreciate that. Why don't we go ahead and get into our questioning? And again, this is to all of our panelists. What got you involved in the movement? As young people, you certainly all enter this work in this space from different sections to intersections. So what got you all into the movement? What was a moment or a conversation or an event that got you involved in this work? And no one has to go in any particular order. So I don't know, why don't we go ahead and I'll start with you, Kamiya, since you started off.
Thank you for that question. Honestly, that question is very hard for me just because there are so many moments that come to mind when I think of how I got involved. Because when I think of the movement, I think of the Black Lives Matter movement, but this has been such a pressing issue in my life since I was born. I'm first generation American, and ever since I was little, I've always known that I was a Black woman, and I've always known what that meant. So it's like I can't recall an exact moment of when I got involved, because ever since I was young, I've just always been aware, and like it's just always been an issue that I know that I've needed to fight for. But if I had to say like what got me involved was just seeing my family disproportionately affected by the criminal justice system, or the prison system, we should say, because as LaSella says, there's no justice in it. But just seeing my family affected by that, losing family members to gun violence, seeing police brutality happen on the streets, being stopped and frisked by police officers in middle school, like that's something those are experiences that I've had since I was 10 or 11 years old. So that's something that has inspired me to get involved with fighting against the system. But in terms of this movement, definitely in around the incident of Trayvon Martin, when he was tragically ripped from us, that definitely was like a stepping stone in, okay, I want to get more serious, and I want to learn about policy, and I want to learn about how do these things like affect us, and how can I learn how to change that. So that was kind of like the defining moment of when I got involved.
Amanda, what brought you to this work?
For me, I think of that one significant moment. It started for me in high school. I was from a predominantly a neighborhood that was predominantly people of color, mostly Asians and Africans, which is Lowell, Massachusetts. I actually moved to a town next to it called Tewksbury that was majority white. And so when I went to that high school, the experience was a huge shift for me and very different. And it kind of started with the mascot that they had at that high school. Their high school had a Native American mascot. They would be at football teams with Native American headdresses and paints on their face, kind of chanting some Native American sayings. And there was just a huge debate in the community about whether or not the mascot should stay up or should be the community's mascot. That was my first moment in realizing, I need to speak up. And so I did, without realizing the backlash that had occurred. So I was the class president at that time. And so I spoke up about how it wasn't okay, it wasn't right, and that we weren't listening to Native Americans on what they were saying, that there were active Native Americans saying this was something they didn't want, and there were other people in the community saying it was about pride and liberation and all these other things. And so I think my first experience was the backlash, really. I got noose hung around the house. Our houses were spray painted. There were some times where I actually had to get escorted by police into the school because it was that bad. And when I saw that backlash, it was just like baffling because all I did was just write a little speech and speak up. And that really woke me up because I went home and you would have thought those things really made me stand down, but I actually felt like I needed to keep going and do more. There's just something in me that made me feel like I don't care. It didn't do much. Yes, it definitely feared my parents and the family, but there was just something in me that felt like I couldn't just stay doing that. And so I got more involved in social justice work and started looking more into community work. So my first experience in the work was actually revolving around Native American issues and Indigenous issues, and then I kind of went on more into African American issues, issues that were revolving around immigration and things like that. And that's really how I found my passion in politics and social justice and things like that. And I just continued it in college at UMass Dartmouth, where there was a space and center that really catered around that, called the Frederick Douglass Unity House. And so that's kind of how I started. And ever since then, it's just like, can't sleep knowing that there's work to do. And unless the work stops, I will not sleep. And so that's kind of the movement, and that's kind of how I got into it. And it's kind of what woke me up, I would say.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate that. Shar, why don't you talk a little bit about how you got involved in this work?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, it's weird. I feel like I'm still starting. I feel like even like being here today is still a part of my start in getting in the movement. I think back to what Kamiya and Amanda were saying, like, I definitely think there was experiences when I was younger, like growing up in different environments. I grew up in Brockton, which is definitely a different environment from where I live now, very suburban. And I've definitely had some traumatic experiences there. But I think like the catalyst for really my official start, like when I got to the starting line, was when I was at UMass Dartmouth and I started as a biology major, and I felt a huge disconnect between who I was in the classroom and who I was every day. I felt like I was a scientist by day and like a Black woman by night. And it was like this weird feeling. And I remember going to the Unity House at UMass and talking to the previous director, Nicole Williams, and I was just like, girl, I don't know what's going on, but this is not it. I don't like it. I feel like I'm two different people all the time. And that's when I started this organization called Speak, which is stimulating, practical, engaging audiences knowledgeably. And basically we have discussions about social justice issues that are typically not discussed in the classroom. So students are in college and they're not learning about this, even though they have to go into the real world and deal with these every day. And I feel like that was really the catalyst, but I feel like even being here today is I'm still a part of the start of it. So I'm not sure if I'm all the way in it, but I think I'm definitely starting to get more in it because there's a lot of unlearning that I'm doing and relearning that I'm doing because, like I said, a large part of my academic experiences were not rooted in what I really experience every day. And so having to like kind of bridge the gap between what I learn every day in the classroom and what I live every day has been like a really like kind of catalyst and important moment for me.
Thank you. Drea Moore, what got you in this work?
Like a lot of the panelists have already said, I'm definitely experiencing things, while I was younger and seeing how my family was affected by the criminal justice system and systemic racism. I would say my passion for social justice started in high school by working with an environmental justice group called ACE, and I worked with the youth group called Roxbury Environmental Empowerment Project. And that's when I started to understand and see the injustices that Black people face, especially the environmental issues. And then when I went to UMass is really when I really dug deep into my social justice journey. I attended my first Black Student Union meeting and I was like, I need to be a part of this. Like, this is what I want to do. And then I did a lot of work with that on campus and doing sit-ins and protesting on campus. And then I chartered the NAACP college chapter onto the campus. And when I graduated, I was like, I still want to be a part of this. I still want to do the work. So I became a member of the New Bedford NAACP branch and, teaching at a school that is predominantly white staff, also I feel like contributes to my work because I feel like it's just a form of resistance being in that space and being the only Black woman. and being able to teach the girls about their history, about their hair, and things like that just really inspired me. And recently I attended the protests, which was Christian Romero's call to action. And, I saw that there was a little bit of disorganization and mixed messages. And I just really just wanted to get out and do something. So I was like, hey, Liv, let's start something. And here we are, C4C.
Liv, why don't you go ahead and talk a little about how you came to this work?
So similar to what Drea had said, I feel like I am new to this work. I was out there on the street corner with my sign protesting, and like she had said, I had felt something within me, and I was like, I knew that it was something I had to be a part of and help organize, just because I felt like there was a strong message. Me living in New Bedford my entire life, I feel like I had never saw something like what I saw when I was out there, and just seeing so many young people just curious and angry, and it really inspired me to put my knowledge and my skills to work, because I felt like I really didn't have a true sense of self-identity until I went to college, right? I never learned about in-depth Black history in school, never learned about slavery in depth. I always felt like I had to mold myself to fit into these standards. And I felt like I never really had a true sense of myself until I started learning about systemic racism and seeing the ways in which my own life has been influenced by that. So for me, it really was just, I had to do a lot of self-reflecting and realizing, okay, it's time to do the hard work, right? Because I was one of those people who I was passionate about the work, but I just was scared. I was in fear to get involved. So it really took a lot of self-reflection and just telling myself, girl, it's time. If there's any time, it's now. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Akia, what brought you into this work?
Wow. Well, thank you guys for sharing your stories and being comfortable with sharing with the 22 people that we have on this call today. So I thank you guys for that. 8 years ago, when Trayvon Martin was brutally murdered, and similar to a lot of stuff that you guys were talking about, that pretty much was my call to activism. I know I was a church kid. I went to church, and my church is heavily involved in activism as well. But growing up in Brooklyn, New York, that also had a caveat on things. You're talking about stop and frisk, right? So when we had these conversations about Trayvon Martin, and me distinctly remembering going to track practices, and our track, like we would run around the block for track practice, or we go to Red Hook, Brooklyn, and having to take the train, and I had to run with a group of boys, and they were my brothers. So like knowing that something could happen to them at a drop of a hat, heavily being policed in schools where we had school resource officers and the way that they look in different school buildings. But thankfully, Benjamin Banneker Academy for Community Development was really rooted in Africana studies. So I learned a lot of this stuff about my history, and I learned a lot about where I came from. And every morning, our different principals, I remember Principal Muhammad himself would stand outside and say, "Good morning, Queen and King." So we knew what we were coming into. I think we had, and during that time period, we had our first die-in, and we were on World Star. So if you guys remember World Star, I know that's like a throwback, but like World Star featured us on their website, and I was working with Councilwoman Lori A. Cumbo of the 35th District in Brooklyn. My godbrother happens to be the chief of staff during that time period, and she was the councilman for my high school. So we were able to talk about discretionary funds and the funding that we needed for wraparound services to ensure that those students were well taken care of. Fast forward 2015, my freshman year of college at Post University, and that's where the flip switched, where I was used to having Black and brown teachers. I was used to having the Black and brown principals. I went from having all of that to having one during my entire time at Post for the 5 years that I went there. And during that time, well, let me take that back too. And during that time period, I started Black Student Union my freshman year. I don't know who told me to do that, but apparently Akia did it. I started Black Student Union during that time period. I was really talking about equitable change and bringing a lot of the systemic and systematic racism back to the forefront, where we're having these conversations about how academia is racist and inherently racist at that. And, you know, people talking about Black students are fearful of talking up. No, we're fearful of the repercussions that might happen to us because we know this happened before, right? So we're having, for that time period from Trayvon Martin till now, protesting in the streets about police brutality when Kaepernick was ousted from his job and him being a martyr for these movements, you know, talking about how that shows up and how that is reflected, but also how students are going to not only Board of Education meetings, but they're going to legislative hearings and they're going to other stuff as well, where it's not limited to a protest. And then exposing and experiencing and teaching students how to do research, watch 13, the documentary, which we watched before the actual 2016 election, and then unpacking your emotions and what that generational trauma looks like. How do you find yourself during that time period? So I've been doing a lot of generational healing. And similar to what Char has said, I think every time you just step into the movement, it feels like it's a birth. And it's a new awakening where it's okay for you to go back and be like, you know, there's some things that I probably said, especially about intersectionality and LGBTQIA, where we could be both. And the things that you probably said in the back, like in the past, that's coming back to the light, where it's like, okay, I can denounce that and not have a conversation about how that looks now. So that's pretty much how I came into the space, 2012, Trayvon Martin, God rest his soul. But yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you all for sharing. So when we talk about pressing issues, what are some of the pressing issues that you all are working on, or that you want to work on, or you feel like are just really cannot be ignored, right? What are some issues right now that you feel just can't be ignored in terms of your generation, in terms of your time? Why don't we go back to Kamiya on that? What are some of the pressing issues for you?
I think right now the most pressing issue, not only for me, but just a lot of people who are also young, is just the matter of defunding police. I think that that's the main thing that has kind of taken everyone's attention by storm. I think that people are kind of tired of having these conversations and marching and sitting in conversations on Zooms and in classrooms and saying, okay, this is wrong, this is what we want to do. And then 2 weeks later, another life is taken. And so I think that right now is the most pressing issue of what are we going to do about police? Because even if there's national legislation, it still falls upon the state and local departments of whether they want to enforce those laws. And so it's about holding local people and your local officials accountable. And so I think right now that's where a lot of people are at. Other pressing issues for me are just more youth involvement, especially in terms of the association. I'm always trying to get like people to join, not even just NAACP, but just Black associations in general, coming and being involved on campus. My campus, UMass Boston, it's very much a commuter school. We have dorms, but our dorms are privately owned, so students can't even afford to live in them. So people are coming to school just for class, and then they're leaving right after because they have to go to work or they have to take care of their kids. Like we have like a really, really diverse population, not in terms of only race and ethnicity, but also in terms of age. We have a lot of people who are in their 30s who are just achieving their bachelor's degree. So a lot of people cannot be on campus for a long period of time to be active and to do those things that they want to do. So trying to also make these conversations and these events that we have also accessible to people. So we're not singling out people that, okay, well, this is going to happen 12 to 2, because not everyone's going to be able to make it 12 to 2. And the people who can make it 12 to 2 can't do 2 to 4. So it's like trying to make sure you get the best time so that you can keep everyone involved. And the very, very last pressing issue for me personally is getting our university to adopt making diversity courses or Africana Studies course mandatory for each student to be able to graduate. And that's the main thing that we're really trying to get on our administration right now. Next month, we're getting a new chancellor, so our old chancellor is leaving. So we're hoping that with this new administration coming in, he's more open to making that a mandatory course. So that's something that we're trying to work on right now, because I mean, I know schools across the country who have adopted it, and there's not been a problem. So there's like schools saying that, oh, well, this and that, and it's going to cause trouble. And it's like, what is the problem? You can teach Western history with no issue. Like, that's not a problem. So what is the problem of teaching all of history. And if you're going to teach Western history and you don't want to adopt a diversity course, then in Western history, teach all of Western history. Teach what they really did. If it's going to be about Western history, make it comprehensive. And so that's kind of our fight right now in terms of pressing issues.
Okay, Kamiya, come with a little bit of that smoke. I hear you. We don't mind smoking the NAACP. We don't mind that.
Sorry, no, we're
A
very
little bit of fire.
very
No, we like to smoke. Amanda, pressing issues for you. What are some pressing issues for you that are important?
I think one thing that comes to mind for me is I wonder a lot, what do we do after we educate people about systemic racism? And maybe for me, maybe it's rooted in exhaustion, but there gets a point where you're just kind of tired of teaching people like racism and this is what's happening and the systemic oppression piece of it all. And I do understand, there are different people for the movement and different works in the movement. I guess for me, I think the biggest thing is, how are we going to solve this problem, right? And I think that's obviously the biggest problem, because we're all trying to address this issue in different ways. But I think implementing policies, and not just implementing policies, but like, I guess it's the conversation about reformist versus abolitionism. And it's really just like, for me, I lean way towards abolitionism than I do reformism. But this idea of breaking down the system and rebuilding it and making it look like what we want it to look like, and trying to get into the work of actually imagining what that looks like, actually imagining that and putting that right into the system. And I think a large part of it is that we need to start implementing policies, implementing things that actually address what's going on systemically, and sometimes might even have to abolish the police, or it might not even have to go as deep as defunding the police, but abolishing it too. So I'm liking the conversation of that we are having now, especially with the young people, about defunding the police or abolishing the police and things like that, where we're talking about solutions. Because I think for very long people were still trying to figure out whether or not the police was even a problem. The police system was even a problem in the first place. But I think we're in a phase where a lot of people are at least realizing this is an issue. How can we solve it? How can we address it? And I think for me, that's really the main issue. How do we get past the education piece and start doing action, start putting in the work, start dismantling, and start making a easier, better life for the generations ahead? And I guess for me, that's kind of really the most pressing issue for me, because I think once we start addressing those things, we'll have a better idea of how to navigate the solutions. We'll have a better idea how to understand what we're addressing, what we're hurt, what we need to solve, I guess. And I think for very long, I mean, if you really think about it, we're here for like past 400 years, and we're still talking about racism as a problem. And maybe, like I said, maybe it's rooted in exhaustion, but at this point, it's like, where can we now start implementing work, and not to act like there's no progression that we've had recently. But I guess for me, I'm tired. We tired, and we want to see work. And so I really want to see more work around what we do past educating. That's pretty much it.
Wonderful. Always. Can always count on you, AK, to be honest, and appreciate that. That's very, very real. Drea, pressing issues for you.
So for us right now, the pressing issue is getting justice for Malcolm Gracia. He was a teen that was killed by the police in 2012 for simply just being Black. And we really want to change the narrative of the story that they put out, using his mental health against him, saying that he stabbed the police officers and that's their excuse for killing him. So yeah, it's really important for us in the city of New Bedford to really get justice for Malcolm Gracia.
Liv, did you want to go ahead?
Just to bounce off of that, so there's this whole narrative that has been pushed by the city of New Bedford, the mayor, the New Bedford Police Department, that he stabbed the police officer, and we've seen the evidence of the case, so we don't want to push our own viewpoints or opinions on what happened, but we just want the community to be able to see the evidence once they get the chance and to make up their own minds. And we know that actually getting the officers fired and charged is something that's going to happen systemically. But we really just want the truth to be out there, right? Because the mayor, they released paramedics reports that work in their favor. However, that piece of evidence contradicts with the hospital records. So that's another thing that we're trying to press for, is getting the hospital records of one of the officers out there. But for our organization right now, we feel like that's really where the heart of the community lies, is just really getting the truth out there, right? And just having the evidence out there so that way people can make up their own opinions. However, the evidence contradicts what we've been told by the city. So we just want them to take accountability for what happened, so that way we can actually open up an honest community dialogue with respect and trust.
And transparency.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Before I get to Akia, for those of you who don't know, the NAACP New Bedford Branch, we actually put out a list of demands, and that was certainly one of our list of demands. I've been on calls all week, and one of the things that I've said to folks is, I think there needs to be an independent investigation at the Attorney General's level, but I've also said I would be in support of an independent investigation coming from the Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights, right? And so I think those things are important in terms of where we stand. But again, this is about young voices. Akia, again, pressing issues for you.
All of them. I mean, so I think the issue, for me, is talking about education, making sure that we have minority teachers in our schools. I think I was fortunate to have that growing up, but talking to a lot of students, especially in Connecticut, where areas like Waterbury, the teachers are not reflective of the actual student population. So we have about over 80% Black students, Black or brown students, and we have about 90% white teachers. So making sure the demographic is there to meet the needs of the students, because we know that social emotional well-being is important for our students, having somebody to depend on, having somebody to have a conversation with. I've been able to develop mentors for my teachers and have conversations with them even after I've graduated from elementary school, middle school, high school, college. So that's a big part of what I'm trying to push. I'm also looking into the demands that the NAACP has also put out. So talking about like increase in recurring mandatory training around racial bias and mental health and de-escalation tactics, ban the use of knee holds, choke holds, and chemical weapons in police departments, because we know that these like weapons that they're using, although they're not real bullets, they're still deadly. I don't know if you guys have seen on CNN and MSNBC, all these different news articles, even scrolling on Instagram, where people are having like these big blotches of Black and brown bruises on their skin from these rubber bullets, and trying to demilitarize the police, creating a statewide and local citizen review board and for fatal and excessive force, stopping these, I guess, performative activism, because people are going out in the streets and like, I'm gonna take a selfie, I'm gonna take a picture, and it's like, yeah, we need y'all doing that stuff as well, but we also need you guys to show up to the courthouse when we're having these conversations with these people at these tables. So trying to limit performative activism and give people more information, because sometimes people are just ignorant. So it's cool to take down these statues of Columbus. We just took down about 4 of them in Connecticut. It's cool to declare racism as a public health issue, but what's next, right? So like having those wraparound conversations about, yeah, took down Columbus, but I want to make sure that you take that out of our curriculum, or if you're going to talk about that in the curriculum, make sure you tell the full story about what he's doing. I know as a first generation Jamaican, if you want to say that, or first generation Brooklynite, like having these conversations about Columbus didn't find nothing that wasn't lost to begin with. So how do we have these conversations and make sure that our students know that we don't begin, it doesn't start or end, it doesn't start with slavery and don't end with mass incarceration. We were kings and queens before him. They came into Africa and they kind of ripped through our soil. And when Africa was thriving, Europe was going through the dark ages, like having those conversations. So I'm really focused on education, because I recognize that not only are our students not having the education, but the parents are not having the education either to have those conversations with their kids. And because school is mandatory from K through 12, I think that's a good place for us to start.
Wonderful. Awesome. When we talk about challenges, what are some of the challenges that you all, as young people, you face so far, right? Whether individual challenges or organizational challenges or community challenges, what has stopped or been a barrier to you all getting some of your goals accomplished in terms of the social justice movements in which you're in, right? And let's be honest in terms of having that call out culture, because it's important to speak truth to power. We'll go back to you, Kamiya.
Oh, this is the worst one for me. This is really the worst one for me. I've had a bunch of challenges. I'm gonna be so transparent. I've had so many challenges in this movement, not only because of another race, but also Black people. Black people are also a hindrance as well. And I'm gonna be so honest, like, ageism is a real thing. And so when you're young and when you're trying to speak up and when you're trying to do things and when you're trying to, people want young people to show up in spaces, but they want you to be there for the camera. They don't want you to speak. And that's one of my things that like really grinds my gears. That grinds my gears, because don't ask me to come and take no picture and you don't want me to say what's on my mind, because that's really gonna get under my skin. There's been so many calls where I've been on the call with older people and I'll ask a question and I've been shut down and they won't even answer my question. They'll just shut me down and be like, okay, well, that's not what you're supposed to say, or that's not how it's supposed to be introduced. And it's like, okay, well, that wasn't even my question, so you didn't even answer. Like, did you even understand what I was trying to ask, or is that the reason why you shut me down? And so that's one of the main challenges that I've had, is trying to deal with ageism, but also trying to deal with respectability politics. Because a lot of people in this work, they want you to respect them, but they don't want to respect you because you're young. And that's just something that I'm not down with. Because I grew up in, just like Akia, I'm Jamaican Cuban American. Both of my parents were immigrants, first generation here. And growing up, I was always taught that, yes, you respect your elders, but don't respect anybody who does not respect you. It doesn't matter if they're old, if they're young, if they're Black, if they're white. If they don't respect you, you be nice to them and you be cordial, but you don't have to respect them. So that's been one of the things that has been ingrained in me and I'm trying to work with. Other challenges that I have specifically with this movement is that there's just too many different messages. And that is what's really harming us. There's too many different messages. There's some people want to abolish police, some people want to defund, some people want to keep. And it's like we're having all these different pockets of conversations, but there's just not one conversation. And we say, okay, this is what we want to do. And it really just has to be that. It doesn't have to be anything more than just one conversation and we get on one page and then we move forward. Like, there's too many different messages. And my last challenge is that, I'm sorry, this one really just gets to me. My last challenge is that everyone wants to be woke. Everyone wants to show off their master's and their doctorate degrees. Everyone wants to talk about, oh, I went to school and I know history and da-da-da. And they want to show up and they want to have the clearest answer. They want to say, they want to be the one to give the speech. They want to be the one to show up on camera. Everyone wants to be MLK. Everyone wants to be Malcolm X, but no one wants to die. That's the truth. Okay, nobody wants to die. And so we have all these different messages. We're trying to go out into these spaces and everyone's fighting up, okay, well, I want to be the one to speak. I want to be the one to speak. And we look crazy. We look crazy. We really do. So I'ma just need us to get it together. I don't know, like, I really don't know. I feel like there should be a new Black agenda, and I think that it should be a national agenda with everybody who's on the same page. So we have one list of actions or something that we want to do and really just stick to that. And then whoever, like, everyone should be a part of it. Like, there should not be a leader. And that's also the problem. Like, everyone wants to be the leader, but they don't want to do the work. They want to show up and get praise. And I always tell that to my members. I tell that to the people who are my e-board. I tell that to the people who are interested in being in the NAACP. I'm like, I speak so highly of the NAACP, but I don't get paid to be here. When I'm driving to different campuses, that's gas, and I'm a student. I really don't have it like that. I really don't have it like that. So if you're gonna be here, like, really be here. Don't be here just to take up space. Be here. And when we're holding like, coming to the events and popping out and dressing up into the panels and the dinners, yeah, that's cute. But when we have a general body meeting talking about the displacement of Black women and sex trafficking, when we have meetings about history of African Americans, when we have meetings about the healthcare system and getting accessible food for Black people, when we come out and we do those things, show up to that part. Show up to that part too. don't show up to the part where there's the news and you want to show up to everything. That's my challenge. Sorry.
All right, cool. That's good. AK, do you want to talk a little bit about? I know we're running out of time, so I'm gonna ask you all just to be mindful of the time. But AK, you want to talk a little bit about challenges that you're facing, that you're seeing, that have inhibited some of your work?
Yeah, I mean, y'all expect me to go after that, but she said the whole thing. She said the whole thing. But yeah, I guess I could echo a little bit. I think being a Black woman in certain positions, it's kind of like I was always aware there were going to be challenges being Black and being a woman, but walking in and being young too, that was a challenge that it's like I don't expect and don't really know how to navigate either. When I'm in a room, people don't take the position I'm in seriously at all. Like, they swear I'm 20 something years old. I don't know what I'm talking about. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges, to prove that I'm educated, to prove that I belong in this table, to prove, overcompensate for how much work I have to show to be taken seriously compared to other people in the rooms. And I think that's like the largest part, being young and not being taken seriously, but also expecting our presence to make it seem like there's some type of equity going on in the rooms, but really you're not allowed to speak. And if you speak, you're disrespectful, you're rude, you weren't raised right, and all these other things. And I think one other thing that really stuck out for me in this movement is the different types of responses you get from certain people. People have this notion that you can start the movement or be a part of the movement without hurting anybody's feelings. And that's really the part where I get confused in, because I think people aren't ready for the sacrifice that it takes to be a part of this movement. Like Kamiya was saying before, with, risking gas. Sometimes you're not really the liked person in that room. Sometimes you look crazy. Sometimes you actually are in this movement, but you're not getting paid for it at all. And we don't even ask ourselves how Martin Luther King or Malcolm X even paid their rent, because they weren't getting paid for what they were doing. So like, there's just so much invested in the movement. And sometimes it goes as far as your blood, death. I could get gory, but it's like, that's true. Like, people really do die for this movement. And I think sometimes when people see that, they're like, oh, I didn't mean to go that far. I mean, I'll say something, I'll post it on Instagram, but I'm not going to go farther than that. But it's like, once you get deeper and deeper in the movement, you lose more people. And it's kind of like I got to a point where there was really like 5 people with me sometimes. And we started with hundreds of people. And it really got that serious. So I think, and this is just ranging from all people of color, Black people, white people. Some people just don't realize how much you have to sacrifice to be a part of this movement. And when they do, they back out. And then it's just kind of like left with you, and you got to do it by yourself. And you kind of feel like you're fighting for your people by yourself. And so you got to find the people that also are in this position to work with that. And I had to kind of learn how to cope with it, and learn that there are different types of people in the movement. Some people were not meant to be in the forefront. And you were just meant to make the signs for us, but not actually be at the march. If that's the case, know your place and do that. But I think the issue is the people don't know their place, don't know that they shouldn't be at the forefront, and know that they don't belong there, but still want to be there because that's where the camera's at. And so I think that's like the main issue that I've been battling with, just being young and dealing with who is really about the movement, who's willing to sacrifice what for what. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Shar, do you want to add anything?
Ooh, yeah, just definitely, again, like, props to what everybody said before, because that's definitely true. And I think to bounce off of it a little bit more, I feel like the kind of message is like not knowing who you are in the movement, and then also like this detached person you've become. Like, you don't know your history, you don't know who you are, and there's no healing that gets done. And a lot of times people still continue to do work without healing, without knowing who they are and the movement, who they are in general. And I feel like a lot of times we end up reinscribing the same things that we're trying to deconstruct. Like, we don't know how to imagine a lot of times. We end up reimagining the same things that we don't want anymore. I feel like that's a huge problem for me, like not knowing how to reimagine. How can you reimagine when you've been stuck in the same place for so long and you haven't healed? How do you reimagine? What are you reimagining? And I feel like a lot of times when I talk to people, they're talking about the same structures that have been oppressing them. They're talking about recreating the same things that are problematic. And so it's like, what are we reimagining? How are you reimagining? Do you even know how to? And it's like, before you even get there, do you know how to reimagine?
Drea, Olivia, do you want to add to that? Thank you, Char.
Y'all just hit the nail on the head.
I think what's so hard is, like a lot of you have been saying, like there's been a lot of people just spewing misinformation and, perpetuating the anti-blackness. And that's been very real for us in our movement and what we're struggling with. And, definitely the ageism piece, where older people are showing up and pushing their own agendas instead of trying to support and help the youth in this movement. We also think self-care and mental health is a big thing, because when we first started protesting, like we were out there every single day. And your emotions are high, your adrenaline is high, you're not eating, and that creates tension. And we were working with another group, and because of that tension and because of some of the mixed messages that were being sent and, the anti-blackness, we had to separate. And it's hard, like navigating people's personalities and, like you all were saying, like thinking that they know everything when in reality they really don't. And, me and LaSella have this conversation about how leadership is lonely all the time. And, that's what we've been getting, like, a lot of older people inserting their bias and judging us based off of the different organizations that we're connected to. So it's been hard, but, like we're in this for the long haul. This is just not, we're going to show up and then, we're done. This is until we get justice for Malcolm Gracia, until we see some national and local governmental change, we won't stop. So.
Absolutely. All right. Akia, challenges.
Y'all pretty much said everything. I think going back to the isms though, right? So you have ageism, the racism, sexism conversation. I'm 23 years old. I happen to be my paying job, which Kamiya has definitely mentioned that a lot, like the fact that the work that we do within the association, we are not paid for. So let's put that out there in the forefront. A lot of people talk about the fact that like, the NWC has millions of dollars and all this stuff is like, but no, we are doing the groundwork. We might be a membership organization, but we're really grassroots if you really think about it. So if you want to know about the organizational structure, go on nwc.org website, read up on our bylaws and all that other stuff. But back to the conversation, when we talk about ageism, I'm happen to be in my paying job, a director of community impact and marketing. I'm 23 years old. I'm in the rooms with spaces with folks that have been in their positions for long periods of time. They think that they could tell me X, Y, and Z. I talk differently than a lot of people. I'm being constantly policed about the way I'm speaking. Not saying y'all, finna, all these other things. Even though these colloquial euphemisms do not define who I am. And I can read you a dissertation if I need to. But so that conversation, the fact that I am also a Black woman, that's how I show up, that's how I'm gonna die, that's how I was born, all these different things. So when you walk into these spaces and not knowing whether that's an intimidation thing because you're a Black woman in these spaces, if it's because you're young, and then racism. So having all these things on top of you, trying to figure out how to navigate within those spaces, but also how to similar to Drea on what they were saying about like taking care of yourself. I remember in December, was it December? Yeah, December I was at University of Massachusetts, Boston for the panel discussion, and y'all asked me, well, like, what do I do to take care of myself? I was like, well, I go to a nail salon and go take care of myself. I'm like, that's really elitist. You need to like calm that down. Because not everybody has access to that. But that's what I was doing. And now we're in the midst of COVID. It's like, okay, Kia, what's next? Also going through imposter syndrome and thinking that I don't belong in spaces when I've been qualified to be here. I've done my track record shows that I'm qualified to be in the spaces and being in the presence of folks that also are qualified to be in those positions and unqualified, because some people get to places higher than they don't need to be. But walking in my truth and making sure I stand firm in that, but also not talking back to elders, but allowing others to understand that youth also have seats at these tables, to have these conversations, to make these mistakes and do all these other things. Like you probably did that when you were younger, and you're trying to foreshadow to me like, oh, Kia, like maybe it's not gonna work because I did this in the past, but you're not having that conversation. You tell me no. And having conversations with people and making sure that they understand that like my worldly view or my viewpoint or the way that my outlook on how to engage youth with these conversations that people think that we don't want to be a part of, and that's not true. looks a lot different. And it's okay to push back against the status quo. It's okay not to do things the way that you guys have been doing it for the last 111 years. It's new blood that we have here in the association. Is now for us to kind of, make a pivot and kind of change around, but also talk about the fact that we have folks similar to what y'all was talking about pushing back about the I am not my ancestors conversation, right? Where people keep on saying, I ain't like my ancestors, y'all about to fight, da, da, da. And it's like, but you went though, and Harriet Tubman would have left y'all in the street because y'all not about that life. So I guess it's a wraparound where I'm constantly defending myself in these streets about Black Lives Matter and we're not, NWC is doing stuff and we're not doing anything, and what y'all doing, these performative activism part, but they don't have their stuff together either on whether or not they have a clear guideline or policy they want to do. The association side where it's like, okay, cool, y'all, let's get this together. We have 6 game changers that we try and do, all them things that's intersectional. Let's figure out what we want to tackle. And then the ageism and the racism and the sexism that gets thrown on you as being a leader in the world, and not only in these organizations that we serve.
Wow. Thank you all. The time is wrapping up. My final question, we'll just do it rapid fire, and I'll give you a couple seconds just to think about it. Rapid fire, and a short answer would be, what is your message to those in power, right? To those who understand and mold the policies. Think about your message. While you're doing that, I just want to thank everyone again for coming out to the NAACP New Bedford branch. This is our program, again, entitled Perspectives, Young Voices from a Movement. We're so happy to have you. Many of you are members. Thank you for being here. As you all know, on the third Thursday of every month is our monthly branch meeting. So we certainly want to see you there. Again, there are certain people I want to thank. Certainly want to thank Brian Town for being on the call. David Aarons, one of our executive committee members, I certainly see you. Amy, I'm definitely saying hello to you, Amy, just so you know I'm saying hello to folks as well. I think I see Deborah DeLeon. Thanks for being on the call. And again, I acknowledged Mayor Bullard. Thank you for being on the call. All of you, we appreciate it. So again, you're young people, right? Quick, what is your message to power? If you could say anything to the people in power really quickly, what would it be? Kamiya, we'll let you go. What would it be really quickly?
I say this all the time to LaSella and just other people, and I'm gonna say it here. I don't want a seat at your table. I want to own the house. So I'll leave it at that.
Want to own the house. Amanda Kufo, message to power.
Period. I would say to the people in power, those you serve, or quote unquote, those who are under you are actually more powerful than you, and can take you down, put you on the seat, take you out your seat. So make sure that you're always listening to the people, because that's who you serve. And yeah, power to the oppressed, not the oppressor.
All right, Charlemya E, your message.
I guess I would say, like, we're not going to fall for those symbolic trades for removing racism. I think a lot of times what happens is you take away a symbol, but you just reinscribe it somewhere else. Like, technology is doing the same things that you say you took away. And I feel like I get a little concerned about people saying symbols are a sign of, like, the Black Lives Matter painting on the street. That's great, but are you really changing the root? So if you're not changing the root, get out the way. And if you are, glad to be there.
All right, Drea Moore, Olivia, message.
Basically what I said before, we won't stop until justice is served for Malcolm Gracia and the truth is told. We also won't stop until we see real governmental change, not only locally, but nationally. Burn the Constitution.
Burn it. What I would just say is what they don't want to do, we will do. So they can keep putting it off, but they can't be in those positions forever. So if they want to keep putting it off, we'll be here to do the work.
Coming.
We're coming.
All right. Akia, what do you got? Message.
There's a lot of pressure. You put me last all the time.
All right, you got it. You got it.
But leadership requires you to reach back, right? So saying COFA means to reach back and get it. So you're not reaching back and having these conversations with young people, and you feel like you will be in that position for 10, 15, 20 years, you're not doing anything in service in the community. So we come in for your position. A lot of people are getting ready to run for office, be chief of staff, diversity officers, all these different things. But yeah, we coming for you, definitely.
Okay. Well, my message is thank you all to everyone for being on the call. I certainly thank my partner in crime, Renee Ledbetter, who's the Vice President of the branch. Thank you always. Executive Committee members, you know who you are. I appreciate you because we got a 7 o'clock call. Appreciate everyone for being on the call. Thank you all for joining the NAACP New Bedford Branch Perspectives, Young Voices from the Movement. Have a good night.